Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to another day with the Financial Coconut. In our podcast, we're debunking financial myths, discovering best financial practices, and discussing financial strategies that fits our unique life. You get it. Ultimately, empowering us to create a life we love while managing our finances well. So today, I have my great companion here with me. He's Soju. If you guys are first time, I'm recording video now. Okay. If you're always listening on audio, great, good, continue. I love the whole audio space. But yes, I'm trying to meet a bigger demand. So doing a little bit of a video now. So if you want to see my dynamic motion and my companion here, my self-care companion, you can check out our YouTube channel. But yes, today we're going to talk a little bit about self-care and specifically some of the myths of self-care. Okay, self-care is increasingly expensive. I'm sure we all know. Right? Or at least this idea of self-care is like increasingly expensive. More and more people are grabbing the word, right? More and more capital is grabbing the word, like your cafes, like your coffee place, they are priming themselves as, you want to live a better life, grab a coffee, that kind of thing, or even your facial, your travel, a lot of people are grabbing onto this idea of self-care. Specifically, a lot of money, a lot of capital is trying to grab onto this idea of self-care. So it's forcing new consumer habits, it's forcing new ways to spend your money, which is very from your coffee joints to your tea houses, your beauty parlors, even your travel, your yoga studio, everybody is using this whole self-care thing. So I would safely say capital has already come in to give us a new way to spend our money, a new way to essentially consume. So like it or not, that's the reality that we have today. And I'm seeing it as a trend moving forward. And that's why I want to talk a little bit about it. Because, talk about money, right? So everything that boils back down to the dollar, you will hear it on the Financial Coconut. And I have some very interesting thoughts about self-care. Fundamentally, I will say that I'm not against this idea of self-care, but there's a very interesting assumption when you think of self-care. Because it assumes that there is an optimal level of self. Okay, it first assumes that there's an optimal level of self such that you need to care for yourself to come back to this optimal level. Okay, let that sink in, think about it, and then maybe you will get some new insights and new thoughts around that. Hey, coconuts, today we're going to talk a little bit about self-care, specifically some of the myths around around self-care. And also because recently I've been observing a lot of money going into self-care, a lot of consumers spending more on self-care, and of course a lot of marketing budget going into this whole thing. Is it like everybody needs a therapist now? Or it's like travel is all about self-care and all that, right? So there's a lot of big capital coming into this space. And recently I was putting together an episode or a season called Future Fitness that focused on some of these ideas. So I thought I'm going to share with you some of these thoughts that I have collected and also just trying to debunk this idea of self-care. So good morning, everyone. I welcome you to another day with the Financial Coconut. In our podcast, we're debunking financial myths, discovering best financial practices, and discussing financial strategies that fits our unique life. You get it. Ultimately empowering us to create a life we love while managing our finances well. So today, about self-care. Right? There are a lot of things, big and small, to discuss. But just to give a shout out to all of you, we're preparing a new show, so it's coming. And also for all of you that don't yet know, I'm trying to record more videos, like for monologues. I'm trying to do this videos thing. So if you're consuming on Spotify and Apple, great, good on you. Continue. I'm a big fan of podcasts. I actually don't not the biggest fan of recording videos but we're trying to do more things and more medium to be in short. So yes, if you want to see my dynamic expression when recording these podcasts, and also my comfort buddy here, his name is Soju, then you should check out our YouTube channel where this whole thing is recorded in a video format. Yes, so big capital to me has taken over this idea of self-care, right? Which is why now everything is about self-care, right? Salon is self-care, massage is self-care, but travel is self-care, eating well is self-care, everything is self-care. And I always find it very problematic when money tells you what to spend on next, right? and then you sort of see a lot of people doing that, right? So I start to see some of my friends tagging, going to the gym, #self-care, going for dance class, #self-care. I'm like, a bit problematic, right? And I'm going to share with you why, right? So let's begin by first defining and assessing this idea of self-care. So the base idea of self-care fundamentally assumes that there is an optimal level of the self. Ayo, this stupid motorcycle keep disturbing my recording. Okay, so the base level of self-care, oh no. Okay, so the base idea of self-care fundamentally assumes that there's an optimal level of the self. That means there is an optimal level that you should be in, and if you meander out of it, then you should bring yourself back with this whole idea of self-care. Right? So it's very interesting. Right? First assumes that there's an optimal level of self. And how do you then define your own optimal level of self? That is an ongoing discussion. We cannot do it in a short episode here today. Check out our new season. Future Fitness is coming soon. But I want to push it a little bit further to recognize that instead of just looking at an optimal level of the self, like the peace, the namaste, or I don't know what people call it these days, instead of looking at this one level of the self as an optimal individual, try to look at it as a band. Right? So that means there's an upper band that if you break, then you go into this territory called injury, right? You get injured. Whether is it physical injury or mental injury, you break down, you burn out. All these pretty much is the level where you kind of break out of it, right? So that is when you, pretty much your injury level, I would say. So in this band from the optimal to injury, this is the band where you kind of work within. Right? It is ridiculous to believe that you can forever be in an optimal level of self and namaste all the time. I think it's quite hard, especially if you live in Singapore in a high pressure environment. So many things changing, so many things moving all the time. It's very hard. But to prevent yourself from breaking through the upper band, I think there are some things that we can do which will then broadly be classified as self-care, which we'll talk about that later. But another thing I want to point out in this view of things is that the absence of stress is not exactly the best thing for you either. Because at this point in time, you see a lot of people trying to do things like, no stress, no stress. Like, no stress is best, right? But is that really the case? Because if you think about it, healthy levels of stress is the basis of breaking through, right? You want to learn something new, you have to go through some level of stress. You want to bring your body to a new format, you have to go through some level of stress. You want to pick up a new hobby, you have to go through some level of stress. Right? You want to read something, you learn something. Even when you listen to this podcast, there's some level of stress because I'm challenging your thought processes. So that is the level that I think we need to look at, right? Which is to hold a healthy level of stress rather than not have any stress. Okay, so prolonged chronic stress is a problem. Okay, that one I'm not discounting that. That means you're forever heightened, you're forever in a stressful state. And I went through periods of that. So I'm not discounting that element, but I would say the other extent of like no stress at all is very problematic also because you want to break through, you want to make progress. That's why you listen to the podcast, right? I think there's a self-select community in the podcast that we do, right? So people that come in to listen every week, you want to improve, you want to make progress in your life. And with that fundamental as your goal, so bring that to your goal, then you must have healthy level of stress without breaking and being injured. So all these things then bring to this fundamental idea of keeping progress, that means keeping growth, while managing your injury so that you don't break down, you don't burn out, you don't get physically injured. That is pretty much the crux of what a lot of people are trying to say, when they talk about self-care, right? It's trying to keep going, keep doing what you do and make progress, achieve the life that you want without breaking down. Without breaking down. That is the fundamental idea behind this whole, frou-frou thing around self-care. Of course, self-care then is adopted to tell you to spend more on this, spend more on that, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but we established this preliminary idea, right, where it is really about keeping progress or keeping growth without breaking down. That's pretty much the underpinning goal of most people. And with that underpinning goal, then comes the whole idea of managing the stress, managing this, managing the self so that you don't break down, you don't burn out, you don't, lack a care of self. Okay, so this pretty much stems the whole discussion. Okay, this is where I come from when I think about self-care. But of course, people tell you what to spend and blah, blah, blah. And that's a discussion that we can have ongoing. So this brings me to my very first point, okay, of the myths of self-care. Because now that we've established this idea, what is the biggest myth, of self-care out there today, in my view, is that self-care is a separate activity that you do on top of your normal life. To me, this is one of the biggest problems out there. Okay, because what does that mean? Okay, you see, I go to the gym is hashtag self-care. Go for dance class, hashtag self-care. Eat well, hashtag self-care. Like go for massage, hashtag self-care. Travel, hashtag self-care. Everything is hashtag self-care. And I get it, right? I get it. You do all these things, you like them, it's de-stressing. Some of them have hormonal changes, some of them have psychological changes. I get it, right? So all these things, if you want to crudely classify them, it is all under the bracket of de-stressing. Right? So you bracket them as de-stressing activity because like we've said in the front part of the podcast, what are we trying to do? We're trying to keep ourselves below breaking point, right? So if you keep yourself below breaking point, these activities do help, right? They help to de-stress you, they help you take you out of your quote-unquote normal life and what have you. So they do help. But this then becomes a problem when you don't actually solve the causes of stress, the causes of the things that are causing you to have to go through all these things, right? To have to feel that, oh, there's a need for me to do all these, right? Other than advertising and marketing and big capital, this becomes a loop. You become going through an endless loop. Okay, there's all these things that are causing problems in your life. You're not very clear what is it. Then you feel like, oh yeah, maybe I should go for a gym. I should do something else. And then you consume to try to solve all these problems to de-stress. And then you go on this loop and it becomes an endless thing. You end up spending a lot of money and you always feel like you need more. You always feel like there needs to be more. There needs to be the next thing and it never ends. So this becomes very problematic. But what's even more problematic by extension of this idea is a lot of people then think about, oh, okay, I have all these self-care activities. Then in my day-to-day life, then my normal life, then does it mean that I don't need to care for myself? Is that where we are going for? Like, okay, I have all these self-care activities that I do as on top of my normal life. Then during my normal life, I don't need to care. I can stretch myself. People can bully me. People can be aggressive with me. I can do all these things. And it doesn't matter how I live my normal life. Is that what it is? I do think that a lot of people have these thoughts because to them it's like, oh, I cannot control all these things. These are not within my control. So I just let people continue to bully me. I just let the stress continue to build up. I just let all these things to continue to build up. And then I will do all this extra stuff to manage the stress so that I don't break down and I practice self-care. But this then becomes an endless cycle and you're actually hurting the root of the self, right? Your identity, your confidence, self-love, all these things does not exist anymore because you then believe that, oh, in my normal life, I don't need to care for myself. Right? So this translates to all sorts of extended problems. And then it becomes a whole new bunch of things that you need to consume then on top of all the problems that has been created. Right? So to me, this is one of the biggest myth of self-care that we do really need to think about, right? Is self-care a separate activity that is on top of your normal life? Or should you practice self-care in the holistic fashion of your whole life, you should care about it, right? Rather than just this extra thing that you put on top. And there tend to be a premium somehow. People will spend more money on this special thing, right? Oh, this special travel, or this special gym that I go to, or this special facial that I go once a while. And then there's premiumization, then you spend more money on doing all these things, right? So these things don't help. So try to think of self-care in a more rounded fashion and to integrate it into your life rather than a special activity on top of the normal life that is causing all the stress that you don't like. Which brings me to point number 2, and that is self-care may be a lot less about the self and a lot more about your social circle. And we'll talk a little bit more about this afterward from our sponsor. Okay, as you know by now, I'm house hunting, right? So I am in Malacca. No, I am in KL now. It's no longer in Malacca. Right, previous video I was in Malacca. So I'm in KL now and I'm house hunting. I'm hunting in this place called Subang. By now you know, I've been talking about this on my podcast again and again and again. One of the One of my biggest love for this place is because there's some level of suburby life. What does that mean? It means that it's a relatively small community. People kind of know each other. You go to the same cafe, you will see the same people. You go to the same noodle shop, you will see the similar people. And after a while, you kind of build this realm of people that you know. You kind of build this social circle. You kind of build this safety because you see them every day. It's very consistent. But there's a big city problem that we have in not just in Singapore, in the world today, right? A lot of people that live in big cities, they feel very ostracized, right? Even in KL, Kyoto, Tokyo, many places, right? They feel very ostracized. Why? Because if you think about it, the city life is a very stressful life. Okay, firstly, it's highly competitive because everybody comes here to make money, to try to grow, to make progress. And if you are born in Singapore, you're native to Singapore, a few generations in already, right? You may not feel like it is a combative place because you grew up here. This is your place, it's home. But for the many other people that come to Singapore to work, it is for competition. They are here to fight. They're here to combat. And they do add to the environment. They do add to the culture in big cities. And it's not unique to Singapore, it's everywhere else. So big cities have this generally combative idea, combative environment. And also there's this problem in the big city where you don't know anybody, right? Or you know a very small handful of people. Every day you interact with all these strangers and it causes a lot of stress, right? So big city syndrome is a very discussed and very well understood idea by now, right? A lot of noise pollution, like the highway out there that is making it very difficult for me to record. There's a lot of noise pollution. There's a lot of sounds. There's a lot of lights. It's a lot hotter because a lot of concrete. Singapore really does a decently good job with trying to lower down the city temperature. And the most important thing is there are a lot of people that you don't know, and they're all here to fight. They're all here to compete. So in such an environment, it's very stressful, right? Which is why I have a tendency to like suburban life, right? Malacca, Subang, where else? Da Nang, even Halong Bay. I entertain the idea of living in Jianshui, a place in Yunnan, right? So they're all like suburby, yeah, kind of townish kind of places, which more people. It's a safer place. It feels nicer because you know more people. And I think that is one of the big crux of why a lot of people are feeling very stressed up and feeling very alienated and feel like they need to have self-care. And this is one of the biggest need that I feel that it is lacking, right? Which is a safety need and a socializing need, right? So I do believe that by this extended thought process, what more people need to do is to spend less time with the self and spend more time with other people. And people will say, oh, but it's all these other people that's causing my stress. But okay, then you can find other people. You don't need to be with the same bunch of people. This then brings me to this idea of reframing your thought process. Why? Because when we were growing up as kids, right, I think a lot of us, we have quite a tiered friend idea in our head, right? So we have a very tiered way of looking at friends. There's the friend, then there's the best friend, then there's the super best friend. There's the kind of one tier system where you kind of rank everybody. And if someone doesn't meet the basic qualities that you look for, you will price them out of this ranking system. But over time, as you develop in your life, as you go out there, you start to realize that there are different kind of friends. Some friends are great to hang out, just hang out, la liang, chit chat, talk cock, what is happening out there in the world, blah, blah, blah. Great, lovely people to hang out. Some friends, right, are just good to, let's say, do an activity, like play tennis, play badminton, play basketball. You need people to play together, right? Over time, you form some sort of loose friendship around this activity, around this sport. It can be yoga, it can be morning walk, it can be anything, right? So there are people that are like that. And then there are some of those friends where you will go to them when times are hard and you know that they have solutions for you. They have ideas. They have been through some of these things that you are going through and they can help you. And then you can be more vulnerable with them. You can do deeper and what have you. And then there are also those friends that is a very transactional, relationship in a way of like, oh, okay, I do business, you also do business, or I'm in this association, and then we ha 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 ha, it's perfectly fine. To move away from this stratification of people, to look at every individual as someone that plays a certain role in your life. And when you look at it this way, you then become more open to this idea of, I can just make some casual friends around a particular activity, or I can get to know more people that does not need to be framed in a very narrow fashion, because I do think that this complex, very rigid criteria is forcing a lot of people not to expand their social circle. Right? Well, what's so problematic about hanging out with random strangers at first, right? To play board games together. After a while, everybody coalesce around a lovely activity, right? And then you start to form a social support network. You may not go into very deep conversation. Some people may be able to end up in a deep conversation, but it doesn't matter. This is the beauty of social life, right? Having that varied social circle, so that you can kind of bounce between multiple social circles, and you can be everywhere, and they kind of fulfill the different needs that you want to have, and it's very symbiotic, right? They fulfill your needs, you fulfill their needs, and then life kind of moves along. And this is the beauty of the suburban life that I think more city people need to think about, right? Or need to practice. Maybe think less, practice more. Try to make more friends, go out there and have a wider, varied circle. Which also brings to this extended idea of, can you remember your schooling days, right? Let me just draw your energy to your schooling days, right? Where every day you're learning a new thing, every day you're pushing yourself, every day there's some sort of stuff. Okay, let's be real. When you're at work, you solve some problems, yes, but there's a lot of repetitive thing going on every day, or sometimes in a week you don't even learn as much, right? But when you were in school, you learn and learn and learn. Every day there's something new, right? Every day you're getting pushed. But it doesn't feel as horrid, right? It doesn't feel as horrible. And I do think a big part is because it is done in a group. There's a social setting, and there's a lot of casual social setting that goes along in school. And that is the beauty of physically being in school, which is quite stupid to do all this online learning kind of thing. It depends on what your goals, okay? But this then translates into a certain idea of like, oh yeah, maybe what we modern day people really need is just more friends, but in different facets, right? So it's not about this new activity or this new silver bullet, right? Or do this and your life will be better. Do this and hashtag dance, hashtag gym, hashtag travel, but really trying to re-envision your social circle and expand that. Have a little bit more friends. I mean, there's a Harvard research that shows that all the happiest people are people with great relationships. But all that being said, I think for city people, especially Singaporeans, let's look at expanding our social circle. Hopefully, this will become a stronger way of taking care of yourself, which I think it will. Okay? Which brings me to point number 3, and that is self-care is probably a lot more about subtraction than addition. When you think about this, a lot of people will say like, oh yeah, I want to take better care of myself. So I eat better, I do better, I work out more, I whatever. It's always just more, right? This idea of more and more and more, which is a lot of addition. Right? And let's be real, we're humans, right? We're not machines, we're not like data sets, so there is a humanal capacity, right? There's a upper limit to what you can, and you need to push this upper limit if you want to become high performance and you want to lead big organization. You need to kind of push this, and it's an ongoing process that we can keep talking about. Of course, as I make progress, that I'll share with you more lah. But I think the general idea here is to try to focus on what is really causing these stresses. Let me give you the typical banker scenario, right? They hate their boss, hate their customers, hate their products, that is the truth. You can look at them, just talk to some of your banker friends, okay? They hate what they do, or they feel very alienated by what they do. Then what they do? They go downstairs, drink, right? Happy hour, right? The whole day not happy, only the hour happy, drink. Right? After they drink, they gossip, they feel better, but prolonged days of drinking and gossiping and trying to like cope with this situation then lead them to have a belly, right? That they feel fat, they feel lethargic, it affects their body. Then they start to think like, oh yeah, I want to do yoga, I want to go to the gym. Then they feel like, very tiring, I need to change my schedule for it, blah blah. But they still continue their whole drinking thing so that they can manage the whole stress from the boss or from the product, from the management. They build all these things to try to cope with the situation, which I perfectly understand. It's very human. But instead of trying to build all these things on top of the main problem, why not let's just look at the main problem, right? What is so stressful about working with this boss? Is there a way to change a department? Is there a way to manage the boss? Right, talk to them, have a conversation. I know not all bosses are easy to talk to, okay? So, but I think I'm quite easy to talk to, okay? But anyway, yeah. So try to manage upwards, right? I think this is a discussion that we lack, right? In our society, there's always this like top-down approach. Everything is the people at the top knows, or they act like they know, lah, right? So you cannot really question them, and it's very problematic, right? But I do believe that the people on the ground knows best, right? Because you're on the ground, you know what's going on, right? So, how do we then learn to reflect upwards? Right? How do we then learn to manage upwards? Okay, I cannot do this in this podcast, but I do feel that this needs to be called out, right? Like more of us need to learn to manage upwards, right? Try to understand what they are thinking and try to influence their thoughts and work through with them, especially when you have dissonance with your bosses and your managers. Right? So that is a extended discussion that we can have. But from a personal level, right, from my personal experience, after doing a lot of things, I realized that one of my biggest stress points is my home. I try everything, right? I go out more, work out more, do everything, right? And then I realized that actually, why not I just shift out? And once I shifted out, everything became better. Like I was in a lot more bliss. I was a lot more comfortable. It doesn't mean all these things suddenly vanish, because there are lingering trauma activities. But I am trying to solve things at its roots, right? And when you solve it at its roots, it's a lot more prolonged. The effects are stronger. And I do feel that that is where we should focus on, right? Removing all these things that we've built up to try to survive. So subtracting all these fancy things, and then try to go to the root of like what is really causing some of these problems. Let's take care of that. And to me, that is the ultimate self-care. Really caring about how you live your life, where are you, what are your goals, what can you handle, what can you not handle, and work through that to care for thyself and not additional activities. Yep. So, just want to plug again. Watch out for Future Fitness. It's coming out very soon. It's a new show that I'm building. But yes, in all and all for today, I think what I'm trying to tell you is not to not care for yourself or not to not participate in self-care, right? Because I think everybody have to make some mistakes as we move along to then be able to finally figure out what really works for us, what is the life that we want and all that. But just try to give you more thoughts to work through this idea of self-care, because it's getting very trendy. Right? And so I want to sum up today the 3 pointers that I believe can help you go a little bit further rather than hover on this myth of self-care. Number 1 is that self-care is a separate activity on top of your normal life. It is probably not, right? You don't want to keep it in that situation where you can just do all sorts of things to abuse your normal life, abuse yourself in your normal life, and then do extra to care for yourself. You want to work towards, caring for the self in a totality rather than a separate activity. And point number 2 is that self-care may be a lot less about the self and a lot more about the social circle that you have. I do believe that a lot of people have too small a social circle to support them, in this city life to try to move forward. So try to make more friends, change the way you think about friends and grow better relationships. I do think that has a lot of prolonged value in that. And number 3 is that self-care is probably a lot more about subtraction and less about addition. You've already added a lot of things. Try to remove some of these stuff and then solve the problem at its root. What is really causing some of these stresses that is pushing you to your breaking point, and how can you then remove them or live beyond those things? Hey, I hope you learned something useful today and truly appreciate that you took time off to better your life with the Financial Coconut. Knowledge is that much more powerful and interesting when shared, debated, and discussed. Share on your social, share with your friends, join our Telegram group, follow us on Instagram, like, share, subscribe, tag us. Everything, little thing that you do will help us push our network to the next level, right? I don't think we just want to make money here. We really want to, challenge some of these thoughts, push things further, and help you live the life you love while managing your finances well. So support us. Okay, like, share, subscribe, 5-star rating. Okay, I'm watching you.